Jordan Peterson appeared on a podcast. The guy who hosts the podcast, he runs the YouTube channel Valuetainment, I believe the name is, and I think it's called the PBD podcast. You can see in the background when he's talking, you could see the sign that says the name of the podcast. I think it's PBD podcast. But anyway, so Jordan Peterson was on this podcast, and surprisingly, out of nowhere, he sort of goes in on Donald Trump. He decimates Donald Trump, particularly the January 6th stuff, the Stop the Steal stuff. Let's take a look and then I'll react.
We talked about Trump earlier. Here's my dilemma with Trump, one of many. He's beating the election was stolen drum pretty damn hard. The election was stolen narrative, I think it's weak for a variety of reasons. The first is, it's pretty whiny. Like, why didn't you win with 5% margin then? So how do you know this isn't your fault? And you think the Republicans aren't gerrymandering congressional districts? Because they are. And so it's not obvious that even if it is the case that there is substantive election fraud, that it's all from one side. And so there's that. And then, you're sure that's the message you want to be sending people? That they shouldn't have faith in their most fundamental institution? You might be right, but it's in your interest for that to be true. And so that's a moral hazard. And then, well, what happens when you retake the House? Because that's what's going to happen. I think the Democrats are going to get stomped in the upcoming election. Are those elections somehow valid, but yours wasn't? And so why magically when the Republicans get elected, that's honest, but when they don't, it's not? And so doesn't that take the wind out of your story? It's like, well, it was stolen. Well, you have the House and the Senate. How do you account for that? So that, to me, that's going to weaken that narrative. Trump is capitalizing on anger. He's using the election issue as a means to an end. And he may believe it, but it doesn't matter because it's a weak story.
R.I.P. to Jordan Peterson's Menchies. Because I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of Trump stands in there that are pissed off. I'm sure of it. Because he does have, he has a somewhat ideologically diverse following, but I think he has a lot of people, right-wing people, Trump people who like him. May even be the bulk of his followers. And they ain't going to like that dog. They are not going to like that one bit. So he makes a lot of good points. Keep it real. First of all, when he says Trump is whiny, yeah. Now, in previous elections, so in like 2016, yeah, he was whiny also back then. But the whininess was not just limited to me. The whininess was not just like, I'm treated so unfairly by everybody, like Megyn Kelly and fake news media is so fake. It wasn't just that. It was also the politician tap dance of being whiny on behalf of the people, which is, Trump was like the only Republican to be like, I'm not going to cut Social Security. I'm not going to cut Medicare. The forgotten men and women will never be forgotten again. And, the elites look down on you. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make sure your job is not outsourced. So he was like whiny, but there was also a whininess against, quote unquote, the man, which is ironic because, he's an elitist and he's a billionaire and he's part of that class. But I think a lot of people thought of him as like sort of a class traitor to one extent or another. He was certainly rejected by like Hollywood and many aspects of the media, bar Fox News, where most of them supported him. But like the whininess was, it wasn't just limited to like me. Well, in 2020, it kind of was. And now that we're past 2020 and this guy does rallies and like everything he talks about is how, the election was stolen and it was rigged and it was unfair. And it's become so personal and so cultish that you're not expanding the tent at all. And in fact, if anything, you're losing some people who may have been in the tent. That's what's happening. And so he calls him whiny. That's correct. He's whiny. This narrative is whiny. He also fundamentally says at one point there, look, if you didn't win, maybe that's your fault. Win by more. You say, oh, if there, maybe there was 1% separating the election, so maybe there's enough fuckery where that could make the difference, but you should have just won by more. And then you wouldn't have to worry about this. You can overcome any of the biases against you. And by the way, that's exactly what Trump did in the 2016 primary. He overwhelmed them. He won by so much that he was undeniable. And Biden's a zombie. You couldn't beat that guy by more. You couldn't beat him. And he didn't even beat him. Popular vote electoral college, he didn't beat him at all. But like, Jordan Peterson's point is, you should have not only won the electoral college by a lot, you also should have won the popular vote by a lot. So maybe that's your fault. Then he accurately points out Republicans are gerrymandering. So you want to talk about, oh, it's unfair, everything's rigged. Well, it's not. There were 60 court cases and more than 60 actually, and Trump lost almost every single one of them. They had the Arizona audit. Trump lost by more votes than we thought he lost by on election day. So you're whining about they're rigging it. It's like, well, Republicans gerrymander all the time. All the time. You have nothing to say about that. So when it's like cheating on behalf of your team, you're like, cool. When it's not, you're like, me. And he says that. When you win, it's always fair, but when you lose, it's always rigged. Isn't that mighty convenient? So credit where credit's due. He's 100% right in this stuff. However, I'm not going to get through a whole Jordan Peterson segment without some degree of criticism. So this is the point where, this is directly after you saw what he just said here in the podcast. Now he's going to drive his point directly into a ditch.
And it's worse than that, because I also think, and I've talked to lots of Republicans about this, is that the best story you've got? You got tradition on your side. You got the truth as an adventure on your side. You got belief in truth on your side. That's been abandoned by the radical left. You've got belief in science on your side. You've got responsibility on your side. You've got the fundamental purpose of higher education on your side. You can't conjure up a better story for Americans than the election was stolen with all that on your side? That's just not very impressive.
Let's go through that point by point. You've got tradition on your side. Okay, fair enough. I mean, the Republican Party is, like, when you look at the textbook definitions of, like, conservatism, a lot of that has to do with maintaining tradition and order and, like, keeping things relatively similar to how they are right now. Like, maintain our way of life type stuff. So, sure. You got it. Republicans have tradition on their side. On the Democratic side or the left side, it is more about progress and change, and let's bring in something new and better. So fair enough. You guys do have tradition on your side. Granted. Then he says you have truth as an adventure on your side. That's a Jordan Petersonism right there, because he's all about narratives and stories and, like, be the hero in the story. And so I think that's what he means, that, like, they somehow embrace the storytelling stuff more about, I don't know, personal responsibility or something. I don't know. I don't know exactly what he's trying to say there, but truth is an adventure sounds to me like they center stories more. I don't know if that's true, but yes, on the left, I prefer my candidates to talk more about macro issues, look at the big picture, look at the data, and have a fundamental moral analysis. I don't want to get bogged down in anecdotes and stories. So, you know what? I'll give it to him. Then he says you have belief in truth on your side. The Republicans have belief in truth on their side. No, they don't. No, they don't. Belief in truth? I mean, I could sit here and go through 1,000 different issues where the Republicans are just wrong. They're just wrong. Take the economy, for example. Every single time we do Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, so tax cuts for the wealthy and deregulation, every single time, you have a boom-bust cycle. And you always have a crash that accompanies that, because when you remove the regulations, you're really removing the referees that keep the game fair. And turns out the people on Wall Street are not the smartest guys in the room, they're the greediest guys in the room. And they can drive the economy into a ditch. See 2008. Now, that wasn't just Republicans. George W. Bush played a big role in that, but so did Bill Clinton, who did the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which repealed Glass-Steagall. But this idea, like, that economic approach doesn't work. By the way, they come out and say, oh, it's not going to add to the deficit, don't worry. And then every single time, it adds massively to the deficit when you cut taxes for the wealthy. They say, oh, the economy's going to take off so much that even though you have a lower tax rate, the revenue will actually be more. Turns out, when you crunch the numbers, that is not true. It's not even close to true. So that's just one example. Belief in truth on the side of the party that started the Iraq War, which we know as a matter of fact was based on things that are not true, and they pushed that at the top of their lungs. belief in truth for the party that wants to cut the social safety net as they pretend like this will help people at the bottom of the economic ladder. That's not true at all. It hurts them. We have the data. We see the numbers. Medicare, Social Security. These programs absolutely helped poor people and working class people. There's no doubt about it. Somehow the Republicans believe in truth. Come on. There was I don't remember the number, but the lies that Trump told, it was in the thousands. There were literally, in fact, here, I'm going to try to look it up as I'm talking to you guys right now. How many lies did Trump tell? Let's see. 30,573 over 4 years. Now, look, I'll be extra kind to Jordan Peterson. I'll be extra kind to all the right-wingers out there. You ready? Washington Post did this article. Now, I don't know who the Washington Post fact-checkers are. Let's assume they're wrong. In fact, let's cut it in half. Let's say 15,000 of these so-called lies are missing a massive amount of context and it's misleading. Fair enough. I mean, I don't know if it's fair, but I'll be extra kind and give it to you. So he told 15,573 lies. Let's just call it an even 15,000 lies over 4 years. That's the party that believes in truth? Come on, dog. Don't be blinded by partisanship. Don't do it. Don't do it, because you don't see. I don't do the opposite of this. I don't say, because I'm more philosophically aligned with Democrats, therefore, they believe in truth. No! The overwhelming majority of the Democrats are either liars or corrupt or dead wrong about a lot of stuff, and I'm not ashamed to say it. He's going to say the Republican Party has truth on their side. It gets even worse somehow, though. They have belief in science on their side. Okay. There are a hell of a lot of anti-vaxxers on the right. There are some on the left, too. And the left should own that, hey, look, people are skeptical of Big Pharma, rightly, but sometimes that skepticism turns into cynicism, and they end up not acknowledging obvious things like vaccines work, okay? Some of that on the left, sure. There's a lot of that on the right, too. And, in fact, politically, at the national level, there's more of that on the right. So, we believe in science. You got plenty of anti-vaxxers right now in the Republican Party. We believe in science. This is the party that disagrees with over 95% of climate scientists. And by the way, I know Jordan Peterson is skeptical on this issue of climate change as well. Hate to tell you, Jordan, you're wrong. You're wrong. Over 95% of climate scientists believe it's real, it's a problem, we got to do something about it. And we already see the evidence happening and unrolling right in front of our eyes. So when you say you believe in science, clearly not, because one of the biggest scientific issues of our time, they're wrong on. Or they acknowledge it's real, but then they drag their feet and don't want to do anything policy-wise. To be fair, that's the Democrats too. So, what are you talking about, belief in science on the right? I mean, don't make me laugh. I don't know what point he's trying to make. How does the left not believe in science? There are some anti-vaxxers on the left, granted. I think the point he thinks he's making is the right acknowledges that men are men and women are women. And the left believes in, there's biological sex, but then there's also gender, and there's a spectrum of that stuff. So trans people are real, for example. I think he's trying to say that is anti-science. So the right believes in science because they stress biological sex and sort of either think gender is the same or just dismiss the topic of gender overall. Then he says, you guys have responsibility on your side. I don't think any national politician is just anti-responsibility. Sure, maybe some Republican politicians talk about it more, but here, I have a hot take for you. I don't think that's a politician's job to lecture the citizenry about responsibility. I think the job of a politician is to represent the people and implement their will. So I don't need you to tell me what to do and how to live my life. I need you to do your job and be a good politician and carry out the will of the people. So you know what? I'll give it to him. Okay, the right talks more about responsibility. But I don't think that if you talk to Democrats or leftists, they'll be like, yes, I don't want to take care of any of my business and be personally responsible at all. Everybody has to be some degree of responsible just to live a normal life, just to get through the day. And so there's no monopoly on it. But you know what? Like I said, I'll give it to them because they use the word more often. But then this one, he's just dead wrong. The right has the purpose of higher education on their side. No. The Build Back Better bill had free college in it. Now, it was watered down, and eventually it was just, kicked to the curb, which is a disaster, and it's abysmal, and you blame the Democrats for that because they're negotiating against themselves, and they're terrible. But the left does argue much more for free college. The right doesn't believe, not a single Republican was for it. Not a single one. The majority of the Democrats in Congress were for it. The majority of the Democrats in the Senate were for it. So you can't say, oh, we believe in the purpose of higher education. You don't even want people to get higher education without being up to their eyeballs in debt. They don't want student loan debt reduction. They don't want free college. They don't want to treat it the same that we treat high school, where it's just free and paid for by taxes. So you can't, oh, we believe in how important higher education is. We just want you to have to suffer to go through it and not be able to afford it and have debt up to your eyeballs and all that stuff. No. I think I'm a staunch advocate and a believer in higher education. I want free college, abolishing all student debt, and free trade schools. You get to pick. Do I want to go to college or do I want to go to a trade school? That's what I want. That's a real belief in higher education. There's nobody on the right that talks about that at all. At all. So, spare me. But anyway, there you have it. He started out good, going after Trump, going after the big lie, all that stuff, and then he had to drive it into a ditch by talking about how Republicans believe so much in truth and science. No, they most certainly do not. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.